my work life. But first I wanted to tell everyone a little bit about me. My name is Mary Jo Richmond. I graduated from University of Maryland in the mid-'70s, so I was a Gamma Psi Kappa at College Park in Maryland. I have a habit of speaking way too fast, and if anybody is in there and is saying I'm speaking too fast, don't hesitate to raise your hand to get my attention, and I'll slow down and repeat myself or whatever I need to do. But it's just, I don't know, just trying to get heard in this large family I grew up in. The first Google tool I want to share with you tonight is, of course now my slide's not even moving forward. You have to have a Google account to be able to do anything on Google. So you need to sign in or create an account. If you already have a Gmail account, you can do so. Or you can use your regular email address, which whatever provider you use, work, provider at home, etc. I made an account that's called MJRKKG. It's not connected to anything I do in my personal life, so it's good to go. The hardest part of creating an account with Google is deciphering Google's safety text, that stuff that they put so that spam doesn't come in. So here's what I put in, MJRKKG, and the password is webinar2. Feel free to use those tonight, and I'm going to change the password after this webinar concludes. So if you want to get into a Google account, go ahead and do so. I'm going to be going back and forth between my PowerPoint and a web browser, so you're going to have to bear with me as I toggle back and forth between the two. By the end of this webinar, this is my goals for you all. You will have seen Google Reader, iGoogle, Google Calendar, Google Forms, and Google Docs. And Google Forms and Google Docs are kind of in the same portion of the Google tools. On a Google page, on a Google home page, you've got at the very, very top of the page, you've got, it says web, it says images, videos, etc. And over on the far right, the last word says more. And right next to that more is a little down arrow. And if you click on that down arrow, on the right-hand side, you'll see what comes up. And it starts with translate, books, finance, scholar, etc. And you want to click on even more. And when you do that, you're going to get a page that looks like this. The programs that we're using tonight are circled. Over on the left-hand side, I've got iGoogle circled, and on the right-hand side, I've got Calendar, Docs, and Reader circled. And those are the ones that we're going to be going through. We're going to work with Google Reader first. A lot of times when you're out on the internet these days and you're reading something in the newspaper or somebody's connected you to an article on Facebook, you've got somebody's blog in front of you, you see that little orange icon that's at the bottom of this slide. That's an RSS feed icon. When you see that on a website of any way, shape, or form, you know that instead of you always going out to that site to read that information, you can grab that site's web address and say, I want that to come to me. So I'm going to go to this MJRKKG Reader page. It's one of those times when I have to get out of my slide, so I'm going to sign in over here, MJRKKG, and the password is webinar, the numeral 2, if you want to do this tonight. And this is what I call my Google Reader page. I'm going to be moving some things because I've got a control panel that I think I can minimize that. Let's see how this goes. Over here you can see my my sign-in name is MJRKKG. I've got a little tool over here for some options. I want to demonstrate how to add something to this page. Over here on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, I'm sorry, under the word Google Reader, you've got something called Add a Subscription. You can click on that plus sign and enter a search term in here because you want to add something. Before I add something, I want to show you what I have. If you go down to the bottom, you'll see my subscriptions. I'm going to close these two folders. One folder is called Demo for KKG. The next folder is called Newspapers. If I open up the newspapers, I really only have one, and those are book reviews for the Washington Post. So I want to look for something from the New York Times. Since I've got the Washington Post, I want to get a bigger paper. So I'm going to click on Add a Subscription, and I'm going to type in New York Times. Hit the Enter key or hit that Add button that popped up, and it should be searching for New York Times. If you can see the top result, there are 2 million people that subscribe to the New York Times. So I'm going to be one of those 2 million people and click on Subscribe, and you can see it's been added down to my subscription area. If another newspaper that I would like to get is the Frederick News Post. I live in Frederick, Maryland. So I'm going to look for Frederick News Post. It's probably got 300 people, 200 people that subscribe to that. So I'm going to click on Subscribe. So now you can see that I've got a couple more newspapers. They're not in folders yet, and I'll be able to add them to my newspaper folder in a minute. If I search in this search window, I'm only searching things that are in my Google Reader. So if I'm searching for something that has to do with cooking, it's not going to be here because I don't have anything in my Google Reader about cooking. It would be odd if that showed up. I guess maybe from the New York Times because that's a pretty big subscription. All right, so that's how I add things to my Google Reader. If I want to read things from my Google Reader, I can just go to my Demo for KKG. Hangry Pants is a blog a young cousin of mine does. It's really about healthy eating and happy living. She's got some nice stuff. She's also blogging currently for The Knot, which is a wedding website. She's a great blogger, great writer, and The Knot has asked her to participate in that. And I like to stay up with what she's doing, so I subscribe to her Hangry Pants blog. Kappa Kappa Gamma is in here. It's a link to their Facebook, the postings that Kappa puts on Facebook. So you can subscribe to that, and you won't have to look on Facebook. You can just look in Google Reader. All right, so once I decide what it is that I want to read, I want to manage my subscriptions, and that's way down here at the bottom of this page. So once I get to this page, you can see I've got 7 subscriptions, and over on the right-hand side, I've got an option to rename them. And usually the names are okay, but you might want to, like the top one, I might just want to say Washington Post Book Reviews. I could click on Delete if I don't want it, and it would unsubscribe me, and I'm going to do that right now with the Washington Post one. Are you sure you want to unsubscribe from it? And I'm going to say OK. Now I'm down to 6. Over here on the right-hand side, this Huffington Post one, I want to add to a folder, and I'm going to add it to my newspaper folder. And you can see that's right down there. And the same thing for the Frederick News Post. I'm going to add that to newspapers. And New York Times I'm going to add to newspapers. So now when I go back to Google Reader, you'll see that I've got all of my subscriptions embedded in my 2 folders. So that's a way to keep it organized. The way to add information to your reader is to click on Add a Subscription and search for something that you're interested in. If you're interested in nutrition, you can just type in nutrition and see what comes up and find something you like. I tell people not to subscribe to something that has 68 subscribers, because it's probably not going to be as good as this thing that has 374,000. So use your own judgment there. One of the other things that I really like about Google Reader is, I'm going to go back to my Hangry Pants article. When I go to the bottom of this article, I have a setting called Send To. And when I click on Send To, I only have Facebook selected. And I can send this article right to Facebook, and it's going to post it on my Facebook account. It's generating right now some images for me that I could repost. It's got 10 thumbnails, and I can pick whichever one I want. And I'm going to pick this one, Hangry Pants, because that's the icon for her website. So I'm going to say Share Link, and it's going to be posted on my wall on Facebook. People are going to wonder what's up because I never post on Facebook. To do that, to say I want to send it to Facebook, it's back in Manage Subscriptions. And it's in this area, and you click on Send To. And it's got a whole list of things that you can choose to share with. Facebook is really the only one in there that I use. I don't do Twitter. I have a blog, but it's really meaningless to most people, so it's not worth sharing things like this on there. So back to Google Reader. All right, so that's how Google Reader works. Does anyone have any questions about Google Reader? If you have any questions, type them in now. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. And of course, it's not in the right spot. The next thing we're going to talk about is iGoogle. And iGoogle can manage your subscriptions also, just like Google Reader, and it also allows you to put something called gadgets in iGoogle. And gadgets I equate to being a lot like the apps that people have on their Androids and on their iPod and iPads. So if you don't have any of those portable devices, you can put these gadgets on your iGoogle account. It's really kind of fun. So I'm going to go to Google Reader and just change over to iGoogle.com. And this is what comes up. Now, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint for a second. When you first are setting up your iGoogle account, this is the very first screen that comes up, and it says it can create your own homepage in under 30 seconds. You don't want to choose too many of these things to begin with because it overwhelms you with information. I just chose news, cooking, and technology. And actually, I didn't get anything from technology on my homepage. I don't know why, but I didn't. You can also select a theme. I stayed with the default theme, which is just that Google icon. But some of them go back and forth. If you pick like the one with the moon, throughout the course of the day it will change when the moon sets and the sun rises. It chooses your location as United States, and you can put in your zip code or your city so that you can have the weather show up for the right area. And I'm going to go back to my iGoogle page and point out that I've got the weather that came up right here for Monrovia, Maryland. It's 63 degrees right now. It's 9:15 at night. I've got YouTube shows up over here. If I scroll down a little bit, access to my Gmail account comes in. I don't really have any Gmail in this account because it's a new account I set up for just this webinar's purpose. And this is a YouTube video of the day. I don't know how they pick that, but they do. If there is something in here you don't like or that you don't want, you can get rid of it. So these are these little gadgets. I can move it if I want. If I would rather have the date and time on the left, I can just drag it and move it over here. If I don't want New York Times top stories, there's this little arrow right here I can click on, and it will say delete this gadget. And it confirms it, and it's gone. I'm not going to have that anymore. If you want to enlarge one of your gadgets for a minute or for 10 minutes, if you click on this full screen icon, it will come and make it a full screen. I'm going to go back to my home page over here on the left. And another way you can make your gadgets full screen is in this listing right down here on the left. It's the same kind of, the same name as all the gadgets that you have on your page. One of the things that you can do is add more stuff to your page. I'm going to click on the right-hand side where it says Add Stuff. One of the games that I like to play on the computer, except I don't have it anymore, it was years ago, is a game called Tetris. So I can just search for Tetris, and I have some options that show up, so I get to pick which one I want. So I'm going to pick this one that says, play a great remake of the classic arcade game. Say, add it now. Gives me some suggestions of what else I might like. I'm not going to necessarily trust that. I'm going to go back to my iGoogle home and see that it's there. And there's a copy of the game Tetris right there. I'm going to go back to that Add Stuff. And at the bottom of that listing on the left-hand side is an Add Feed or Gadget. And just like in Google Reader, you can add information right here. So that local newspaper that I said I liked, the Frederick News Post, I can just type in the web address right there, fredericknewspost.com, and it says it's been added. When I go back to iGoogle Home, the Frederick News Post shows up, and the top 3 stories from today's newspaper are right there. So this way I don't even have to go down to my mailbox and get my newspaper out in the morning. I can just check right here and see what the top newspapers are. I like iGoogle. I use both iGoogle and Google Reader, and here's the difference in my life. I'm a school librarian, and some of the searches that I do are with those databases that public libraries have and that school libraries subscribe to, and they don't work very well in iGoogle because the web addresses tend to be too long. So they fit nicely in Google Reader. They don't fit in iGoogle. So my Google Reader I have reserved for my professional life, and my iGoogle I have reserved for my personal life. And that's just how I've divided them. And the other reason I divided them was I wanted to be able to be comfortable using both so that I can teach teachers and teach kids, since my job is in education, how to do both of them. I didn't want to ever not have the skill for both of them. Does anyone have any questions about iGoogle? We're going to move on to, well, I'm going to wait a second if anybody has any questions. And go back to my PowerPoint. And move to the calendar feature right now. I absolutely love Google Calendar, and I want to tell you why I love Google Calendar. It's easy to post on Google Calendar. You sign in with your username, and you post all of your information. You can make multiple calendars. Some people have one for mom, one for dad, one for sporting events, one for scouting events. Let's just say that as an example. Some people have their work one and their personal one. And then you can put the calendars together to see if you've got any conflicts, and you can separate them if you just want to look at one person's calendar. So it's no longer you have to put initials after events. You can just color code a calendar for one person. Also, it's very easy to grab the code from one of these calendars and post it on your website or your blog if you want to do that. And then if you want to update it, it's not updating a web page anymore. You go to Google, you log in, you go to your calendar, and you update your calendar there, and it updates your web page automatically for you. And the way that it works together is just so slick and makes it so easy to keep things up to date. Nobody has an excuse anymore. Once again, to get to it, it's that more from the Google homepage, and you click on Calendar. I've posted on this PowerPoint slide an example of a calendar populated with some information. This is one of my ones from work, and you can just see this is an overview of May. And I'm going to just go over this right here real quickly before I move to the live Google Calendar. I have 2 calendars at work, a media services one and an optional one. Underneath of those calendars is an add button, and if you click on that add button, you can add other calendars to your Google Calendar. Under U.S. holidays, there's another word, add, and in that area you can add calendars that come from other sources. For instance, if you've got Outlook at work, there's a way to connect the two so that you've got both Outlook and Google in the same area. If you use any other online tools that for some reason have calendar information in there, you can pull it in this place. When adding a calendar in Google and you're going to post it somewhere, you determine, actually even before you decide if you're posting it, you determine if it's public or if it's private. You can have a Google Calendar and say it's private, and nobody, absolutely nobody, will be able to find it. I'm going to go to Google Calendar right now and just show you some of that. And the way I get to all these different things is, like for this one, I'm typing in calendar.google.com. And I typed in, no, I didn't like that one. Here we go. Or we're in the week of Mother's Day. Today's the last day of the week. It's Saturday. And I have populated some information for next week, and I want to point out that I've got 3 calendars. The first one is correlated exactly to this Gmail account that I set up. mjrkkg@gmail.com. And then there's KKG and KKG Calendar 3. So I'm going to go to the next week using this button right here. Scroll up a little bit, and you can see I've got 3 calendars, blue, kind of a yellow, greenish, and a pink. And they correspond over here. If I turn off the blue, it goes away. Turn off the pink, it goes away. Turn off the yellow, it goes away. So that would equate to the 3 different kinds of calendars for personal, work, and maybe extracurricular activities for family. Another way that it could work is if there are any actives that are listening to this webinar, it could be a calendar for the whole CAPA chapter, and then you might have the calendars of the officers so that you can easily see what overlaps if you're trying to find a common meeting time. So when you look at this, you can see that I've got some overlapping events. These are all fictitious events, so it doesn't really matter. But you can see that I've got some work to do, or that we'd have to split, and not everybody can go to everything kind of event. One of the things I really like about Google Calendar is this Quick Add feature that's right here. If I say Quick Add, it pops up a little window, and I'm going to say breakfast at Karen's on Thursday at 10. And it throws it out there on the next Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning. It assumes an hour. If you need to make it longer, you can just click on it, edit event details, and make it a little bit longer if you want to. Let's say 10 to 11:30. And save it, and then it's longer. If it was meant to be a different color from a different calendar, it's right here, calendar, and I can say that it's really supposed to be calendar 3, save it, and it will change the color, because that didn't work. I didn't give it any chance there. I've got it in 2 places now. Another way you can add an event is just type in the block and then just say office meeting, and it works. It's right there. All right, so this is the feature. If you want to add another calendar, click on Add. And I'm going to call this one KKG3. Whoops. Calendar. I'd have to create calendar right there. And there it is, KKG Calendar 3. Whoops, that should have been Calendar 4. When I click on this little arrow next to the calendar, there are all these options. One of them is changing the calendar color, which is kind of fun to do. But more importantly, I'm going to go to Calendar Settings. And I want to show you that embedded in here is the code that you would use to post it on a website if you wanted to do so. The options are down here if you need it. If you're a pretty tech-savvy person, if you need to take it to another place, the options are down here for you to do that. I'm going to save this and go back to Google Calendar. The other way to create an event in Google Calendar is clicking right here and just say Create Event, and it gives you the options. One of the things that I do like is you've got this repeat button. So if you have a monthly event, you can say that you've got a monthly event that repeats on a certain day of the week, and it's going to be meeting for 12 times before the year is done and they start again. So those kinds of things are kind of nice, those features. A lot of calendars have that these days, though. That's really it for calendars. Does anyone have any questions about calendars? I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. And the next thing I want to talk about are Google Documents and Forms. The two are kind of hand in hand because you can't have forms without documents, and I want to start with forms. So you're going to end up seeing some documents, and then we'll talk about documents later. So why would you ever use a Google form? I'm sure some of you have probably answered questions or surveys that people have sent you online that link to a Google form. If you ever need to quickly gather data from a group of people, it's a great tool to use. Most of what I do is work-related. We have a book club at work, so I throw out 5 options, and people tell me which book they prefer to read, and it's quick. Within 3 or 4 days, we have answers from everybody, and we know which book we're reading. Every year we get, and I don't think I told you all what I do, but I'm the district administrator for the school library program in Frederick, Maryland. We have 64 schools. So every year I ask to get the updated names and phone numbers of the people in the departments, because some have assistants, some don't. You know, people move, people retire. I just need updated info, so people fill that out for me every year. And I also take an annual survey every year to see how many computers are in each school library. If I sent out the email, people would respond by email, but then I'd have to transfer the data to a Google form. And it's a real time waster for me. It's much easier for me if they have to give me that information anyway, just to fill it out online. Once again, you go the same way to that More, and you go down to Documents. And once you get to the document area, you're going to see a little screen like this on the left-hand side, and you're going to create a new form. And I'm going to go back to a live form for that. So I'm going to type in docs.google.com to get there. And you know, so much of this is just like Microsoft Office, so some of the colors are the same. Green is like Excel, this little red for PowerPoint, and blue is for Word. So I'm going to open up this one that's called KKG Webinar. I'm going to walk you through it, and maybe some of you will have a chance to take this survey tonight if you can link to the link that I'm displaying in the PowerPoint. I've answered this survey so far 3 times so that I could have some data in here. But so you can see that it looks just like a Excel spreadsheet. There's some limitations to it. It's certainly not as sophisticated as Excel, but it does the job. I'm going to go to the word form, and I'm going to say let's go to live form first so that you can see what my form looks like. And I've said just a fun form to fill out during tonight's webinar. And I said if there's an asterisk next to it, it's a required field. And I've made all 3 of my questions required. My attitude is if you're asking questions and you want answers, you should be requiring the answer anyway. So some place to put how old you are, how did you hear about this webinar, and then please indicate your preferences for the following questions. You can make up all the answers to this. I'm not looking for real information at all. How comfortable are you with tech? How comfortable are you with science? How comfortable are you with reading? And then I'm going to answer this again. I'm going to say email again and just randomly pick some answers and hit submit. And when I show you what comes next, this text at the top of this page, I was able to edit and put in myself. So you can do that too. People tend to not read this, so you might have to make it as short as possible. If you make it long, they're just going to say, I'm done. You know, they don't expect to be able to read it. You can also click on See Previous Responses, and you see this nice pie chart of where people are. You can go back and get this another way too as the person who created the Google form, but this is a chance for the user who's submitting the information to see where people are at this point, other people who've answered these questions. All right, I'm going to close that window, and I'm back here at my form, and you can see now that 4 people have answered this, and of course that was me all 4 times with fictitious data, because it doesn't matter. From this form question, I can also say edit form. This is what I want to talk about right now. Actually, I'm going to change this up a minute, and I'm going to go over to the word file and say new, and say come down and say form. And this is what it's going to look like for you. If I go back to the PowerPoint, this is where we are. All the items that I've circled right here are items that you need to pay attention to when you're making a form. First of all, I want to forewarn you, when you're making a form, you should send it to yourself first so that you can answer the questions yourself to check for errors. There's nothing worse than sending a form out to 50, 75 people and then having to retract it and say, whoops, can you fill this out again? I made a mistake. So you want to fill it out yourself, maybe get a couple close friends to fill it out as depending on how many people you're sending it to, just to make sure you've captured all the information you need. You can change the theme so that it reflects what you're doing. For instance, I could put books in the background if I was doing a survey for my book club. Adding an item, I skipped that one. That's what you need to do to add extra items. It defaults to 2 sample questions, which you can edit pretty easily to make question 1 and question 2. But if you have more than 2 questions, you need to click on Add Item. Under the More Actions option is where you can find information to embed the form in a website or a blog if you want to put it there. And then the one right over from it is what you would do to get the information to share it. Also, at the very bottom of the page, where it says you can view the published form here, you can grab the web link to email to people. Questions themselves. The first one says question title, sample question 1. On the right-hand side over there, there's a pencil that you can use to click to edit this question. The middle icon means duplicate this question. You're going to find that many times you're asking 10 questions, and 8 of the questions are very similar. So it's easier just to duplicate the question and make the small edits necessary. And then the trash can is obviously to delete that question. You can put in help text if you want. Most people don't. Question type, we'll get back to some of those so you can see it. But you can have multiple choice, checkboxes, scales, open-ended responses, etc. And this circle right here next to the word done is where you would make it a required question. That's what we just talked about. All right, I want to go to the form. If you can link, let's go to the blank form first. So here's the blank form with all those options I talked about, and you should be able to just type in, ask a question here. And then this is what I really wanted to show you, the different kinds of questions that you can ask. You can ask for a paragraph, and you get a much longer answer than if you just ask for text. Okay, and then if you want to delete one, over here is the trash can. I'm going to delete sample question 2, and that's deleted. I'm not going to save that, so it's not going to matter anyway. All right, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint, and if you can try linking to that, I'm hoping people can, and then answer that quick survey. That would be wonderful. People could try that. And I'm assuming that at this point people have linked to it, so I'm going to move over to the form so we can see if it's getting populated with any data. Now I had put in answers 2, 3, 4, and 5. I don't think that other people are able to link to that form because I'm not, yeah, someone said I'm not able to link. The webinar is going to be available, so you'll be able to look at it later if you want, and you'll be able to get in and access this too. And we'll go over that right before the whole webinar is over so that you will have a chance to do that. All right, so the data is collected in real time. It's kind of fun to see as people start bringing it in, start bringing in the data. The next thing we're going to do is move on to Google Documents. People say Google Docs or Google Documents. It's interchangeable. One of the reasons I like it in this education environment I work in, provide a collaborative space for people for working on documents of any kind. If kids are required to put in a PowerPoint, they can post it in Google Docs, and they can, like, somebody can have the first 3 slides, someone can have the second 3 slides, someone else can make sure that they flow together. Any of those documents can be in there and people can work on them. It also provides a storage space accessible from any connected device. I'm always panicking that I'm going to forget my external flash drive or my laptop might not work or something. So I try to put my presentations in Google Docs so that if something happens somewhere, I can retrieve it and I won't have lost what I've spent hours working on before I present somewhere. I wanted to forewarn you that tonight, as I was preparing for this and I used my new account, the MJR KKG account, I hadn't set a language preference and it defaulted to an Asian language. I think it was Chinese, and when I went to it at some point, everything was in Chinese, and I had to back up, find document settings, and change my language or pick a language. I just hadn't picked one at all. To start in Google Documents, you need to begin by uploading your documents. And I've drawn an arrow to where upload is. My PowerPoint says there are 3 documents in this account. There's actually right now 4, but one of them doesn't have any data in it. And we'll go over that in 1 second. All right, so here are the 4 documents. The untitled form, that's that sample form I worked on that I just showed you real quickly. KKG Webinar is the real form that you can link to later on or play with however you want. Google Tools PowerPoint is the PowerPoint that I'm using tonight that has the links to everything on it. And then KKG Sample Document is a document that I put in there that I'm going to show you right after I show you how to load a document. To get a document into Google Docs, you click on Upload, and then click on this word Basic. And then I select a file to upload. I'm going to go to my desktop. Where I've put in KKG Sample 2. There's no meaningful text in here whatsoever, but I'm going to say Start Upload. It's a very short document. It's uploaded. So when I go back to Google Docs, I should have one more document in there, and I do, KKG Sample 2 Docs. I'm going to open up this bigger document, KKG Sample Document, because it's got a variety of kinds of things in here. We're piloting digital readers in the schools, and this is just a summary report of how things went, and some people gave feedback at the very end, and I want to show you that most importantly. So beginning with this red text, people started adding their thoughts on this document. I was hoping that they would just edit the document so that I wouldn't have to go back and add this in myself, but they gave me their feedback down here. One of the things I really like about Google Documents is over here on this side, it says MJR KKG is viewing. When I click on that, it provides me with the Google Chat area. And if you've never used Google Chat, imagine that you've got 4 high school students working on a document, or 4 college students, and you can say, hey, did you actually read Chapter 5? And so the next person might say, yeah, I did. I can post the information in this report on Chapter 5, because if you didn't read it, I've done it, and I can make sure our report's up to speed. So it's just a nice, really nice collaborative area to work on a document of any sort that has to get turned in somewhere, personal or work or school. I guess that would be personal. Any questions right now about Google Documents? It's really pretty simple to get them in there. You can even add video in here as a storage space. Google gives you a lot of room here. So I know there are limitations in certain environments of how much stuff you can have. So if you've got pictures or things like that that you want to put somewhere, video, this is a place that you can definitely put that information. I want to show you some of these share settings that Google gives you when you've got a document that you want to share. For this document, I said it's public on the web. Anyone can find it. No sign-ins required. Or you can post it to anyone with a link. No sign-in required. And I also said anyone can edit it. And I typically have it a little bit more limited, like only people granted permission can access it, just because some of the stuff that's like a work in progress, if it's related to work, I really don't want the public having access to it yet. It will eventually become a public document, but until it's finished, it's not a public document. And I control it via the contact list in my Gmail account. I could also post a link in Facebook if I wanted to. If I'm doing something for the state for school libraries, I could post it in Facebook, and other school librarians who I'm friends with on Facebook would be able to access it that way. We talked about this real bonus, the ability to have a chat with the people that you're collaborating with. It can be in different locations or even from the same computer lab. If in the school environment, if you're in two different corners of the room and it's a quiet area, you can talk in here and people won't even know you're doing it. Does anyone have any questions about anything? I wanted to tell you that most of the images tonight were captured using Jing, which is a screen capture software program that I absolutely love to use because you can just isolate the exact portion of the screen that you want. And if you like Jing, you can get that on techsmith.com/Jing. It's a pretty nice program. If there are no other questions, I'm going to stay open for just a second in case people have questions that they want to ask. And if there are no other questions, I'll sign off in about a minute. Please feel free, if you go back to the first page of this PowerPoint, I'll slide back up to the top. So I guess the third page of the PowerPoint, there is a login and a password to access the documents that we used tonight. And I'll change that password in about an hour. So if you want to get any of those documents, especially the PowerPoint, why don't you go in and grab that tonight? All right, thank you all for participating. I hope that you got something out of this, and I hope that you can take what you've learned and use it at work or at school or in your personal life next week. Thank you very much.